Okay, hi everyone. We're going to cover Chapter 8 on creativity. So in this chapter we have a few learning objectives. We're going to define creativity, and then once we do that we're going to figure out what makes people creative, and then if you're a manager, what can you do to increase their creativity. So here are some examples. If you want to do this, you can take out your computer, piece of paper, and there's a bunch of different creativity tasks that you can do. So you can take some of these if you want. The first thing we're going to do is to kind of figure out, how do you measure creativity, and how is it defined. So there's a few different tests that you can take. You can do things where you name all the things that you can think of that move on wheels, list all the different ways you could use a chair. There's tasks where you see these abstract drawings and you have to write down all the different things that you might think it is. So you can look at this and see, what do you see? Some people see that they see a stove, right? These are the dials. Some people see that this is like the top of a truck with some lights. And there's been a lot of different ideas. You can even rotate this and see if you see something different. Like if you rotate it, maybe you see the side of a notebook. Here's the Walt Cogan test. Again, here's an abstract image. And remember, for all of these different creativity tests, there's no wrong answer. You're just supposed to be creative and think about all the different possible things that you see. Some people see a shoe, a mountain, a roller coaster. So you can kind of look at these and think about, what do you see? Here's another one. Again, what do you see? If you're interested in taking this test, these next two creativity tests I'm going to talk about more in detail. So if you want, you can pause this video and do these two next creativity tasks yourself. So the first one is list all the different ways you could use a newspaper. So go ahead, sit down and think of all the different ways you could use a newspaper, what it could be used for. Again, no wrong answers. Try to be creative. The second one, it's a Walt Cogan test for similarities. So you want to list all the ways that you think a cat and a mouse are alike. So if you want, pause this video and do that. If not, you can keep listening. Okay, so if you've done that task, the next thing we got to do is to figure out, okay, how do we score these assessments? How do we figure out who the creative people are? So there's actually 4 different components when measuring creativity. So the first one is fluency. That's just basically how many ideas you came up with. So go ahead and add up all the different number of responses that you came up for your creativity task. Creative people tend to have higher fluency. That is, they come up with a higher number of ideas. Elaboration, basically this is the amount of detail that you come up with. So say for example, I gave you a brick and I said, hey, list all the different ways you can use this brick for. What can you use it for? If you just said, hey, you could use it for a doorstop, okay. But if you said, hey, you could use it for a doorstop to prevent a door from slamming shut in a strong wind, you'd actually get more points because you elaborated. So what happens is creative people tend to elaborate a lot. They see things very vividly. They have more detail. They see things in that clear detail, like I said, instead of just like an abstract idea. Originality, basically this is the idea where you compare your responses to everyone else's. So this one might be a little bit difficult for you, but I'll show you some responses in the next slide. Original creative people tend to come up with ideas that no one else has thought of. So that shouldn't be too surprising. And the last one is flexibility. So basically all of your responses, look at them and see if they're related. Do you kind of come up with ideas that are all related? Or are you coming up with ideas that are from very different categories, so to speak? Creative people tend to touch on a bunch of different categories compared to one. So let's look at some examples to make sense of these 4 different scoring components. So here are some responses from data I collected from students when I was at Binghamton University. So what can you use a newspaper for? All of these basically are responses that people came up with, but we put them into categories. So me and a bunch of research assistants, we put people's responses together. So someone says as a weapon, someone said coil it up and hit with, someone said hit something, fly swatter, kill bugs. So we decided that all of these things were related, right? They're related to hitting someone or something. So we said that these were generally from the same category. So look at your responses. Did you have a lot of hitting, like to hit someone, to kill a bug with, right? This would basically, right, remember you have your total number of responses, that's fluency. And then we can look at things like originality. elaboration and flexibility. So elaboration, right, that's the detail. So look at this one. Use newspapers to cover tables and floors when painting a picture or when kids do crafts or an art project. So this one has a lot of elaboration. So instead of just saying to cover the tables, right, they said in very great detail that, hey, you cover it if you're painting what? Well, a picture, or maybe if kids are doing arts or crafts. So this one had a lot of detail. So this one would get a lot of points for elaboration. You can also see the different categories. So say you had something in the hidden category, and then you also said, hey, you could use it to make little beads to make a necklace. That's a different category. So this is the whole idea of flexibility, right? Do you just have all the same responses from one category, or are you touching on a bunch of different categories? So we kind of have fluency, excuse me. That's the number of ideas, elaboration, how much detail you give, flexibility, how many different categories are you touching, and then originality is basically, are you coming up with ideas that no one else came up with? So this is a weird one, like to stuff your bra, right? This is the only person put that. So they kind of would probably get points for originality because no one else came up with that. And you can look at the responses for the cat and mouse similarities. So look at your responses and see how you did relative to most of these students at Binghamton University, right? How many ideas did you come up with, right? Did you come up with 1, 2, 3, or did you come up with 10 or 20, right? You definitely get a lot more points for fluency. What about elaboration? Did you just say something like use as a weapon, right? 2 ears, two eyes, right? Something simple like that. Or did you have a lot of elaboration like this one? Because you'd get points for elaboration. What about originality? Did you come up with anything, right, that's not on this page? Because then you might get points for originality, coming up with things that no one else had thought about. And then flexibility, right? Are you all in one category, or are you touching on a lot of them? So that's basically some creativity tasks that you can use to figure out, to what extent am I creative? Okay, here's another test that we're going to take. In fact, this was actually one of your self-assessments that I sent out. So I'm actually going to score these for you and send out your results so you can actually see how you do relative to your classmates at SUNY Oswego. So how this works, if you haven't done this, the self-assessment, make sure you go and you take that before you see how this is done. Otherwise, keep listening. So it's called the RAT test, the remote association test. So what happens is you see 3 words, and then you have to come up with the one word that's related to all 3. So if I give you the words basket, 8, and snow, there's one word that connects all of these. So take a minute. Do you know what it is? It's ball, right? Basketball, 8 ball, snowball, right? So you can do those. So here's a bunch of other ones: cottage, swish, cake, right? Cheese. So if you want, pause the video and you can go through and see if you can figure out what some of these are. If you're interested in this PowerPoint that's posted to Blackboard, in the notes section of this tab, there's actually a link to this page where there's a ton of these if you want to do some of these. So here's some more of them that you can do. So that's the remote association test. So we've kind of done some creativity tests. So now we should probably define creativity. So creativity is when you come up with new ideas, right? So if you're just coming up with new ideas, that's what creativity is about. Innovation, sometimes you hear about creativity and innovation together. They're related, but they're separate. Creativity is when you come up with ideas. Innovation is when you actually implement those creative ideas. So you can be creative in that, hey, I came up with this new product or this new idea. That's being creative. The next step is to take that creative idea and actually make it happen, right? And so the reason we differentiate these two is because they require different skills, right? Someone might be really good at being creative and coming up with ideas, but they're not really good at championing those ideas, and that they're not able to sell those ideas to other people or make them come to fruition. So if you've ever seen Shark Tank, shows like that, some people have great ideas, but they're not good at selling those ideas and really showing other people what they're about and why they're important. So we differentiate them because they require different skills. So people who are creative, sometimes, we'll talk about what they're like, but people who are innovative, who they actually sell those ideas, usually have really good skills in terms of selling. They have great confidence. Sometimes they can be a little bit narcissistic because they're so confident in themselves that they get other people to believe in those ideas, and they're better able to sell those ideas. So really there's two types of creativity, convergent and divergent. So convergent is when there's only one correct answer, right? So you're basically, your ideas converge, they come together on one right answer. Whereas divergent creativity, there's no one right answer. So if you think about the test that we took, right, so the first one's the WK stands for Walt Cogan, the Guilford alternative task. So remember I showed you all those pictures and I said, there's no wrong answers. What could these pictures be? Or I said, how are a cat and a mouse alike, right? And then the remote association test, right? All of those different creativity tasks, we're actually measuring different types of creativity. So can you figure out which ones these measure? So the remote association task, what does that measure? Convergent or divergent creativity? Right? If you said convergent creativity, you're correct, right? Because remember the remote association test, there was only one right answer. So that's the type of creativity where you have to be creative and you have to figure out the one solution. Divergent creativity, right, there's no one answer. So all the other tests that you took were measures of divergent creativity. Why do we care about these differences? Well, because sometimes, again, they require different skills, but especially in the business world, we really care about divergent creativity, right? If you think about in business, right, come up with a new idea, a new product, right, there's no one right answer. There could be any answer. So we really want to better understand what makes people creative from a divergent creativity perspective, and what can we do to make our employees increase their divergent creativity. So those are actually the next two things that we're going to talk about, right? What makes people creative from a divergent creative perspective, and then what can managers do? So that's actually going to be our next video.